Well, hello everybody and welcome to another Faster Masters Rowing Radio. I'm Rebecca Caro and as ever, I'm joined by Marlene Royal.
Hello, Rebecca and our Faster Masters, wherever you may be, we're here too.
Exactly. And somebody asked me for some clarification last week and they said, I'm never quite sure where to find your stuff. So when we do these live shows, we're streaming them into YouTube on the Rowing Chat channel. We also stream them live into the Rowing Chat Facebook page, my personal Facebook page, and the Masters Rowing International Facebook group. You can only do one each of a page, a profile, and a group. So those are the three. So two of them are Rowing Chat, and we don't actually stream this onto our own Faster Masters Facebook page for now, but maybe I should change that in the future. So let me know what you think. If you know which channel you're on when you're watching, you can put a remark in the comments underneath the live stream. And perhaps it would be great if hi to the people I can see. We've already got 6 people on live. Tell us where you're watching us stream. And if you think we should be doing it somewhere else, tell us that as well. Now, first off, we have, as usual, sponsors. We're very grateful to our sponsors. They support the whole of the Rowing Chat network. And our first sponsor this month is the Speedcoach Summer Regatta Series. It's a way for you to race people on the water virtually, particularly now that a lot of places are allowing single sculls to race. You can be anywhere in the world, and all you need to do in order to participate is to have a single and some oars, a Speedcoach GPS Model 2 with the training pack software, and you register an individual account on the Link Logbook app. Then each week there is a defined distance which is published on the NK website, and you row the distance during the regatta time frame. So you must be honest about that on your local body of water, upload your session, and you can row it as many times as you like. They will take the fastest qualifying piece for the leaderboard. And you can join or leave the regatta any time before the event ends. Full details of how to join are on the rowing.chat/sponsor. And that's the Speedcoach Summer Regatta Series. Our second sponsor is the Nuts and Bolts Guide to Rigging, known as the definitive book on modern rowing rigging. It started a long time ago as a spiral-bound affair, and that is actually the copy that I know that I have, and it has become the authoritative book on how to rig for rowing and sculling. The author, Mike Davenport, takes you through everything in careful steps with diagrams and very clear explanations. He also covers what tools are best to use and how you can gain speed in your boat by taking actions off the water. You can get all the details of Mike's services at his website, maxrigging.com, or go to the sponsors page, rowing.chat/sponsors. Now, a quick reminder, if you would like us to answer your question on the podcast, if you're watching live, you can put it into the comments, and if we have time, we'll come to it, or you can buy a question. Go to fastermastersrowing.com/register/question-email. 3 types of questions: a private email answer, an answer in public on the podcast, or a one-on-one video Zoom chat with myself or Marlene. Now, hello to people watching live. Tanya Sutherland is watching us live on Facebook. Hello, Tanya. Welcome. And Marlene, let's get into our first topic. Marlene is giggling because I put the banner across the page and it says Conscious Incompetence. Now, this was a question that arose on the Masters Rowing International discussion group. And I wanted to ask, have you reached the development stage of conscious incompetence in rowing? That means you know you're not doing it right. Is that right?
I would say so. Awareness of incompetence, right?
Yeah. Well, my understanding of this is that there are actually 4 stages to learning any skill. And the first one is unconscious incompetence, as in you don't know you're doing it poorly. Then you move to conscious incompetence when you know you're not doing it right. Then you go to conscious competence, which is by thinking about it, I can do it right. And then you move to unconscious competence, where I no longer have to think about it, I can just do it. And it might be easier to relate it to perhaps, do you remember learning to drive a car?
Sort of.
Did you learn a stick shift? Did you have?
No, I hated stick shifts. I hated stick shifts. I refused from the beginning. But yes, absolutely. That's the progression when, the first stage is, hey, we're in the boat and we're just having a good time, right? We're not, we have no idea what's going on, what we're supposed to be doing. We're just enjoying it, right? That's our, what's our first one? Our conscious incompetence. No, that's unconscious incompetence. So you don't have a clue. You're just having a good time. You're taking a lesson. You always wanted to take a lesson in your life and learn how to do this. Now you're learning how to do this. And so the whole thing is just like an incredible amount of feedback you didn't expect. And that's all good enough because it's all about the euphoria, I think, at that point. I think then you want to start to understand this a little better. You want to maybe learn how to move the boat better, or you're just interested in knowing more. I think that's when you get into the conscious incompetence, because you make the mistake of going to see a coach, right? And the coach has all kinds of things for you to say, like, well, try to carry your blades a little higher off the water, lift your chin up, move your finger back to the edge of the oar, sit up a little bit taller, don't put your oar so deep, try to keep your hands level. So I would say that all kind of probably goes into that stage. And I gave a lesson to a very someone on Friday who had never sculled before, but is a very, very experienced athlete. And afterwards he said, I simply had no idea there was so much involved in this. So it was quite funny.
It's true though, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it doesn't look, I mean, it's deceivingly complex. That's what I would say.
It is. And of course, one of the things that you all know, because you are our regular listeners, is that we recommend drills and exercises as ways of isolating part of the rowing stroke, figuring out how to do it. And then, of course, you have to recombine that back into your regular rowing. And that, I think, is where you move from conscious incompetence to conscious competence. You know how it should be done correctly because you did it in the drill. And then when you think about it, you can incorporate it successfully into your regular rowing or sculling. Now, I often have people when I'm coaching them say, oh, I've got too many things to think about. I always say, only think about one thing at a time. So my advice is think about one thing and do it for a decent number of strokes, at least 10. So you're thinking square early, take a stroke, square early, take a stroke, square early, in that little voice in your brain. And then I say, now take 10 strokes and don't think about it, but don't think about anything else either. Do your 10 strokes, and at the end of that second 10, so you've done 20 strokes now, review what you did. Notice how you are sculling. Are you succeeding in squaring early when you're not thinking about it? And that, of course, is the 4th stage of unconscious competence. I didn't think about it, but I did it.
I think probably stage 3 takes the longest, because that's where you're actually working on technique. And I actually just wrote a piece today about coordination training, and all of this is happening in your central nervous system, and it's happening in your cerebellum and your brainstem, and you have all these areas of motor control, we call it, in our central nervous system. And your this might be an interesting podcast at one point, just to review the parts of the nervous system that are responsible for movement. But your cerebellum is responsible for smooth coordinated controls, smooth coordinated movement. So it's the part of your central nervous system that actually develops the connections and the patterns and grooves in the movements that you then execute peripherally, which is your arms and your legs. Outside of your brain and spinal cord, everything is peripheral. So you have to do drills and exercise to train new patterns. You also have to think about them. This is the emotional side of it. This is your limbic system. You have to focus, and that focus is part of developing that pattern. And then you have to practice it, and then you have to practice it under more complicated conditions that might be different oar sizes, blade sizes, that might be water, wind, temperature, stroke rate. Those are all different conditions. So then you have to take your skill to be able to execute it into different conditions. But it's all central nervous system training. So there's a lot to it, actually.
And I'm going to add another layer on top of that, which is that you have a coach in your mind. You have a little voice in your head. Everyone has it, and you can leverage your voice in your head to help you. One of the things that I find, particularly when coaching women, is that the voice in their head is often really negative, that you get to the point where you realize you're not getting something right every stroke. And that little voice in your head went, oh, that was a bad stroke. And then you do a few more and you go, well, you're really not getting it right now, are you? Come on, you doofus. And it creates this mental negative spiral, which is extremely hard to get out of. Mm-hmm. And so when I'm coaching people, I spend a bit of time explaining how children learn and how adults learn. And the principal difference, if you're interested, is that adults are judgmental like that and children are not. And so you have to learn to approach it as if you were a scientist, not an emotional being. Was that the movement I wanted? Yes or no? Do I need to make a small change to get to the movement I want? Yes or no? And there's no good or bad. And that makes a very, very big difference with athletes' ability to make changes to their movement patterns. Being judgmental tends to work you into a spiral of continued incompetence where you end up just getting frustrated and understandable.
It also takes energy. Like you're spending your energy talking to yourself, telling you how bad this is, instead of putting that energy into learning what you're doing. I mean, right off the top of my head, I can think of 3 or 4 different women who I've coached, say in the last year, who they're literally talking to themselves in the boat and shaking their head when they don't do it right, I shouldn't say when they don't do it right, when they're not satisfied with the result, right? So then you see the sculler going by you, talking to herself, shaking her head, and you're going like, are you going to do that at 32 strokes a minute? This takes a lot of energy, and it just simply becomes a habit, and it is something to look at, because if that shaking your head becomes part of your stroke cycle, I think that will become problematic at some point, if you're really focused on trying to race your best, you cannot be shaking your head and talking to yourself at 32 strokes a minute in the middle of your, power 10. So
very true.
And
a comment from someone watching live. I'm finding stage 4 sometimes happens when strokes are faster and I don't have time to think. So that's a good point in relation to what Marlene was just saying. And then sometimes during race pieces for time, everything falls apart and I go back to stage 2 and wonder what the heck happened. I get that. Now, we had a question at our last podcast about the difference in your split times when you're rowing on freshwater versus salt water? And it was Cici Aguda who asked this question. So in general, salt water is denser than fresh water. It has more things in it, grains of salt, for example, and it makes you more buoyant. So I learned to swim when I was just 7 years old, when we went on holiday to the seaside in Pembrokeshire in West Wales. And I turned up in my brand new school, age 7, in September for the start of the school year. And our first swimming lesson, they divided us into people who could swim, went to the deep end of the pool. People were intermediate, were in the middle, and beginners were in the shallow end. So they could put their feet on the bottom. And I confidently said that I had learned to swim. So they put me in the middle group, and I swam out to the middle of the pool, realized that I was sinking because I'd learned in salt water and my body wasn't as buoyant. And so I had to go back to the shallow end for a few weeks before I could progress back. So in salt water, your boat sits higher up out of the water, and therefore you have a different, basically, hull profile. So Marlene, what does that do to your split times?
I'm not 100% sure what all of this means, to be honest with you, because I've rode on so much different waters. I mean, if you have less hull in the water, I would say you would probably go faster because you have less wetted surface. But then there's water where you are in between, which is called sweet water, which is like the Sea of Galilee, which is highly mineralized water. It's very dense. It's not as dense as, say, salt water, the Mediterranean is, but it's still different. So, I think your splits would tend to be faster, but I'm not an expert in this. I will be totally frank about this. I don't watch a lot of, I'm not like a split time junkie. So, to be honest with you, I just I usually, if I'm training somewhere, I'm comparing one day to the next. I'm not comparing it to another body of water necessarily. So
we'll ask our listeners to send in some answers to this one. However, what I would say is you're far more likely to see differences in your split times depending on the temperature of the water. If you are in cold water, you go a lot slower than if you are in warmer water. So it might be that cold water is denser and you go slower. And so maybe salt water is slower than fresh water. Next time, someone will give us the answer. I'm trusting to the community to tell us what to do. But the second part of the question was how to relate my times on the erg to my times on the water. And this is a common question that we get asked often. And it is self-evident that your erg times are rarely the same as what you can do on the water. And I'll tell you why. When the concept to first got its electronic meter, the Dreisacker brothers developed the electronics alongside Nelson Kellerman. Mr. Kellerman's stepdaughter, Alex James, is the chairman of Nelson Kellerman now, and I interviewed her recently. And she told me that they decided that they would set the split time to equate to an on-water time for a heavyweight men's coxless 4. And that is what you are getting when you are seeing a split on the erg. You're getting a water equivalent if you are a heavyweight man rowing in a coxless 4. Now, I spent a lot of time, as people who know me in my past, working for the Rowperfect organization. And the original Rowperfect rowing machine was devised by a very smart Dutch engineer called Casper Rekers. And Casper wanted his machine not to be an ergometer, but to be a rowing simulator. And he wanted your on-land training to be directly relatable to your on-water training. And so when you get onto a RP3 nowadays or an old Rowperfect, you set your body weight and you say what boat class you're rowing in and whether you're a man or a woman. And the algorithm adjusts your 500-meter split to reflect those differences. So I typically set mine to my body weight, plus I tend to choose a women's quad because that's what I generally row in. And so then I can take my erg times and see whether or not we can do the same time in the water. And of course, it's dependent on flat water, no wind, and perfect blade work. Getting all three of those is a bit of a challenge. Marlene is cheering.
Yes.
So that's right. So relating your erg times to your water times is not impossible, but it is challenging. So if you know your water time for a 1K piece, go and look at what the 1K times are for a heavyweight men's Cox List 4, and you will see what the split differences are. And that gives you a clue as to how much you probably need to add or deduct from your score in order to reflect the boat you're rowing in. But of course, an added layer on top of that is age. As we age, we get less strong. So actually, the simple answer is don't bother. Just accept that you have two parallel pieces of information and they don't really equate.
Well, I would say one. I think we've probably even talked about this in the past, but one personal study that I did was back in 1999, and I was still training full time at that time, and we were in Aiken, South Carolina, where a lot of the U.S. Speed order races were held, and this was one of the important speed order races, and there were a number of lightweight women, U.S. women lightweight scullers, who had all been out at the national camp, who were training, and they were taking. Actually, I think it was lightweight trials, perhaps. But anyway, we had perfect conditions, flat, no wind, and all the women who were in, I'm going to say, the top 15 entries, I knew their erg times because their erg times were posted. So I took their erg times, and then we had the final, the semifinal. Then I took everybody's finishing times on the water, and consistently there was a 15% difference between their water time and their erg time. The water time being slower, of course, because you're in the water. But that was one thing, like, across, say, 15 lightweight women, that was very, very consistent, like plus or minus 1%. So that was just a little informal study that I did. But I do think what Rebecca says, you have to compare. If you're trying to set your splits off something, if that's what you're going to use for training, you set your erg paces off the erg, you set your water paces off the water, because they're going to be different.
So what was the difference? You said 15%.
15%. Slower on the water than an erg time.
Think about it. A lightweight woman is 59 kilos. A heavyweight man is 90 plus kilos, probably. You know, there's an awful lot of body mass.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, nowadays with the dynamic ergs, it could be different, because on the dynamic erg, your body weight isn't moving the way that it is on the old concept, on the stationary concept 2s, where your body weight is moving so much more than in the boat. So, but that was just an observation I did a long time ago, and but you do have to do erg to erg, water to water.
You do. And just as a technical point, the dynamic ergs are called floating head ergos, and the fixed ones are called static head, if you want the way to say things.
Yeah, we want you to know how to do it right.
How to do it right. Our next topic today is one that is extremely close to my heart. Splashing in the boat. Now, Marlene, you got an email.
I got an email 2 days ago that said, "Help me, please. My doubles partner is splashing me terribly. I'm getting water in my ears. I'm getting an ear infection. What should I do to help my doubles partner stop splashing me?" And of course, my first reaction was put her in the bow seat. And she wrote back and she said, "That's absolutely impossible. She will never do that." And then I said, "Well, then teach her how to row with her blades high enough off the water so that she can square up. I mean, that just, it wasn't a lengthy exchange. It was one of those, like, I'm in between projects and this is sort of cute, so I'll answer it. But she was really serious. Like, I'm in despair. What am I going to do? This is just awful. I'm getting wet all the time. And, if you're not rowing on really clean water, it's extremely unpleasant to be splashed all the time. But
the worst bit is when the one drop of water goes directly into your ear, like it bypasses everything, and it's like it's awful, because of course you can't stop and shake your head.
No, not if you're sculling. You're like, oh, what do you do? That could be a new drill.
So I am a splasher, confession.
Why?
I splash because I try to do a little backsplash at the catch in order to ensure that I'm still pushing my handles away from me while I'm placing the oars in the water. So my thumbs, and I'm trying to push and rise my handles up. And I know that makes a tiny little backsplash, and that when I misjudge it, which I can blame on the boat being off balance, or I can blame it on the waves and the wind, or I can blame it on myself and my lack of skill, that I do have a tendency to splash. And I know that I even splash myself a little bit in my single, because of course, moving in the direction of travel, if you make even a small little V splash, particularly if your catch angle is acute, so that your blades are going in reasonably close to the front canvas, the bows of the boat, you then start to travel through the little droplets of water. So that's my explanation for my splashing. And me and Sharon in our club, we are the winners of the splashing prize. Apparently, we're the ones that everyone hates to row with.
Well, they can just put you in 2-seat, right? Where do they put you? So
I go all over the place, but it's kind of known that you're probably going to get somewhat moist if you row with Rebecca. And I will say, in my defense, that I row with Dreher oars, and the ones I row with have the slightly rounded spoon. They're like fat smoothies, so they're about 1 centimeter deeper than the regular sculls. So when I'm rowing with my own blades, I know what I do. And then when I row with a regular pair of just cleaver blades, obviously they're a little shallower, and I suspect that I adapt my technique because I know that they're going to be higher off the water because they're not as deep in the fattest bit of the blade. So what do I do in order to stop splashing? Firstly, I am very conscious of where the splash happens. Is the splash happening, like Marlene said, when I am rolling the blade square? In which case it's pretty obvious I'm not holding my handles low enough in the boat. So that's where in the recovery are you splashing? And mine tends to be more on the placement of the entry. And so what I do is I make a more deliberate entry. I actually roll forwards with my hand and I hook my hand up. And actually, I think the action of making a deliberate entry drops the oar into the water quicker, faster, and then there is less splash. But if you go up and you sort of gradually raise your hands and gradually raising your hands and gradually raising your hands, I think then you're like almost pushing the water away from you as the oar's going in, and that can create a splash as well.
Yeah, I think you're on the right track. Just keep your hands moving out. That's the important thing. Stay on the recovery, but you might want to try just even place it just a hair faster, but the motion is correct. But you can play with that. You can play, you have to play with how your crew rows too, and how they place the blades, and how you blend in with the rest of the crew, because what we do in a single may not always be the same as what we do when we're in a team boat too. So because there are other people helping you set the boat and being responsible, and if the boat isn't set, that is also going to be an issue for somebody placing their blade, because maybe the boat's tipping to one side or the other side. So doing lots of stabilization drills, front end drills are really important.
Yeah, I'm very conscious that when I'm sculling on my own, I don't tap down nearly as much as I do in crew boats because I'm in control of the boat and mostly I can hold the boat level. So I know what tolerances I have on either side. And then when I get into a crew boat where it's a little bit offset, my blades are usually the first ones on the recovery to hit the water. And that's because I haven't tapped down as much.
Yeah, so I mean, it varies. But, for people, you could ask your doubles partner to carry their blades a little higher off the water. You could make sure that they're, do more pause drills so that you're getting accustomed to carry the blades a little bit higher, so there's room for them to roll up and not tap. Lots of entry drills, do entry drills sitting at the front end, top quarter slide, those types of things and try to work on just, minimizing the splash, so that's all our blade work. Yeah.
Buy them a rain jacket.
Right.
It's a waterfall.
Right. You can get a duck hat to wear. So.
Now, last time we were on the podcast, we talked about fun boat names. And I have just a few more. And I also promised that I would tell you about the double that I own and what it's called. We had some Welsh people talking about their boat names. And they have one called Idris and Efor, or Ifor, which is the erg and the skull. So if anyone remembers Ivor the Dragon, which was a kid's animation when I was young. Somebody else who's from Cornwall in the southwest of Britain said their boat is called Selkie, which is the Cornish language word for seal. And a Selkie was a sea maiden, so like a mermaid who could take human form, and they had mystical properties. So great name, I think. Another non-English language one is called Amber OK Wu Wei, which means go with the flow in Chinese.
That's good.
I like that one. And Soup Dragon. If anyone remembers the clangers and the Soup Dragon. Sorry, if you don't get that reference, don't worry. Our penultimate one was XLI, which was Roman numerals, and apparently was Ben-Hur's number on the Roman warship when he was a slave. That was from Kelly Klepper. Thank you, Kelly. That's a great one. And then there's the BFG, which is another children's book reference from a Roald Dahl book called The Big Friendly Giant. And this person said that the person who owns that is 195 centimeters tall. So there you go. He's clearly a big friendly giant. And now my boat, my half of the boat, which I co-own. It's called Mental Floss. And the story behind this is I own half of a double pair with a lady called Tonya Williams. And when I'm being a little tardy getting on the water, she hurries me along by saying, come along, Floss, get a move on. And we were in the US, in New York City, in a grocery shop, queuing for the checkout. And you know how they have the magazine stand and the candy stand, right by the checkout. And we're standing there, and my eyes are just ranging over all of the different magazines that they have on show. And of course, they're very different from the magazines that we're used to seeing. And I saw a magazine called Mental Floss, which is still being published, has a very good Facebook page. And I laughed and pointed it out to Tonya. And I said, hey, Tonya, look at that. We should call our boat Mental Floss because you're mental and you call me Floss. So our boat is called Mental Floss. Very unique to us. I don't think we'd ever sell it to anyone else. They wouldn't understand. And just to wrap up with, we had a very nice little discussion thread about what do you do to enable yourself to row early in the morning? And this was a question that was posed by Ezz Eldin. And I think he was being reasonably serious about, how do you manage your life? What are the hacks that you use? And people responded with the kind of, I negotiated with my manager so I could have a late start, or I lay out my clothing the night before. and then it got kind of funny and quirky. So, Marlene, first up, what's your best story for the things that you do to help you get up early for an early outing?
I'm probably pretty simple and pretty boring. I just set the alarm so I have exactly an hour before I have to leave the house. If I do that, then I don't have to really worry about anything the night before. But I do have my rowing kit bag that goes with me in the boat, so that's always ready. I do have my bag with dry clothes that I keep in the car just in case. That's always ready. So the 2 bags I need to take with me are basically always ready and stocked with things. So I don't have to do very much other than, eat something, put my rowing clothes on, and fill my water bottle most of the time. But I do need at least, I like an hour before I have to leave the house, because I don't like to rush. And then if I have to think, I can think. So I like to think, like, don't crowd your day. Try to give yourself enough time. And if you can stretch a little bit, move around a little bit before you hop in the car. I mean, I'm only in the car for 5 minutes before I row, but some people have to drive farther. So I don't know, just, think about when you need to eat. Like, if you have to drive far, which some people do, maybe you prepare your breakfast or your snack so that you take it with you in the car. You don't need to do that at home if you have a long drive. But yeah, make it as friction-free as possible. I do the same thing. I have the same routine, so I don't have to think about it really. But
I agree, the friction-free routine. I'm very different from you. I like to stay in bed for the maximum amount of time possible. But I also need to be actually awake. And so I wake up, I'll maybe check the news headlines, then I get up. And I do my stretching and mobility while I'm brushing my teeth, because I need hip mobility. And sometimes I get very tight calf muscles. So I'll sometimes brush my teeth with one hand leaning on the bathroom wall and just stretching my calf muscles. And then, I the snack and stuff, that's for after the row. I used to drink a coffee in the car going rowing, and then I realized that was a really bad idea, because you get out on the water and need to use the bathroom. So that was the end of my coffee.
Not on an empty stomach, stomach. Well, a lot of my rows, I'm actually coaching. I coach all of my sessions from my single. So I actually have to eat before I go, because I'm often in my boat for 3 hours at a time. So I need energy too. When I go out just for my own rows, that's a little bit different, because I'm on my own schedule. But when I have classes, I'm, at least 3 days a week, I'm on the water, almost 3 hours. So I definitely need to eat, stretch, warm up your back. I think that's an important thing to be on that's one of the reasons I get up an hour ahead of time, is we talked about this before, you have to smush your spine, your discs down, because your discs are very hydrated when you get up in the morning. And if you just get in the car and then get in the boat, that's when the majority of herniated discs tend to happen. So it's important to be on your feet, do your stretching, go up and down the stairs a few times, just get some circulation, and be vertical for a little while before you get into your car to get into your boat.
So the best answer in the discussion thread that Ez started was a lady who sleeps in her rowing clothes.
I mean, it saves you time, right? You don't have to think. As long as you've got comfy rowing clothes, why not?
I thought that was a trick that lightweights did when they were trying to sweat down to weight. They would, but they also wore plastic bags and all sorts.
Oh, they're horrible things. Yeah, it's horrible things. But
we don't need to remember that, do we?
No. But no, I think that's a great idea. Or just I would say get an RV and just sleep at the boathouse. That's the best. Sleep in comfort, and then just wake up. And my motto is live where you row. I do not believe in commuting to row. I think you should live as close as possible to the water that you row on, if you can.
Yeah, one of my worst life choices was working in the West End of London, rowing at Thames Tradesman out by Barnes Bridge, and then living in Clapham. And I basically had a 5 to 8 mile cycle ride through each of those 3 points of the triangle. And it lasted for a few years, but I wouldn't want to do it again.
No, way too much, definitely.
I'd live near where you row or live near where you work. Yeah,
exactly.
that is definitely a better solution. Thanks, everybody, for coming along with us on the journey. We would love to widen the circle of people who listen to Faster Masters Rowing Radio. So if you know one person who you think would enjoy the episode that we've just covered, particularly all that discussion about conscious incompetence, please forward a link. The link is in the rowing.chat website, or just get them to open a podcast app and you'll find our podcast in there. And we would love to have you along next time. It's been great. I'm Rebecca Caro, and we're here with Marlene Royal. Till next time, bye-bye.